So everyone, welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is our third virtual cafe in a series of 12, and really our objective was that we could share some learnings with everyone, and we are getting a lot of good feedback and response from everyone saying that this is really good. There are many questions that we have, and we are getting to meet some of the industry experts who are able to share in fairly candid conversations on the challenges that they have faced and how they have learned and overcome to build a corporate career for themselves. So thank you so much for everyone for joining in. We just wanted to do a short poll to take us. Just want to know about your on sessions that we are having and how you came to know about it. So, can you just pull up the poll? We will just for 10 minutes, sorry, 10 seconds. Request everybody to make your, all right, and another maybe 3 more seconds, 3, 2, 1, and we will end the poll. Thank you so much, everyone, for your feedback. And this is really important for us to understand how we are reaching out to you and how better we can get onto this. We'll be sending across another survey just to get your views on some of the topics you would be interested in. So today's topic, redefining leadership development strategies. And what we know is in almost every organization, HR initiatives many times, and the challenge is really about sustaining it. And when it comes to leadership development, unfortunately, organizations, the business side of it feels that the leadership the training programs are not very helpful and they only serve a limited purpose. We have a very different view about it, and we believe that leadership development is serious business, and unfortunately there is no school that helps build leaders, and that's the reason why HR in every organization has to drive it at the hem and ensure that they are getting and building the leaders for the future. And that's really what our topic is today, to really understand from our eminent speakers and experts from the domain as to what organizations need to do to sustain leadership development relevant for business. That's really what our effort is going to be today. Just to go further, a quick introduction. Yes, we are as an organization at this point celebrating 50 years of our innovation, and across the 50 years there are firsts. Now, one of the things we had shared was we will ensure that we are able to share with all of you, something specific, a trivia. So what we did was, last time we spoke about success profile and how we've been helping some Olympic authorities be in the top medallion tally. One time we spoke about STAR, which happened to be Bill Byam's, innovation in the interviewing space. This time I'm going to share about Manager Ready. So in 2010, the first true form of word assessment came into play. And the reason I'm saying that is because there were many in the market, but all these are competency tests that have been objective questions, pretty valid. But DDI decided to in the space of assessment and ensure that human assessors are able to later on and create a two form of virtual assessment called Manager Ready. On the back of success of that, later on, Leader 3 Ready came at leadership levels as well. So there are quite a lot of exciting innovations that DDI has been doing. As you can see, our experiments at this point with VR in the learning space are also giving good feedback to us. Coming to the year of transition. So why we chose to call this a year of transition and not a webinar on this pandemic? And I'm very sure that many of you must have attended and might have got a slight bit of an overdose of in the pandemic situation. So we decided that let's move out of it and start getting into the real challenges that we have. And one of the research that DDI has been doing over a period of time said that leadership transition has been the single largest challenge for any leader and is more dominant when it comes to front levels of leadership. In the last two webinars, we have few themes, right from how feedback is important and not just about seeking feedback, but acting on the feedback, the importance of failing it forward and innovation, and how we can create a culture of innovation as leaders in the organ. To pay it forward as a responsibility of a manager to be a good coach for his team member to ensure that we are able to help our team sustain and grow, to the two-way leadership, because while you might be ready to coach, you need a coachee who is also serious about their own personal development. The multiplier skill, which really talks about core skills required by leaders irrespective of levels, and if invested the right way, they can go a very long way in individual's career. And really the test of leadership, where there are challenging times, what should leaders do when it comes down to really being a true leader? So those were some of the things that we have spoken of. I would like to just introduce you to speakers, and both of them come from very prominent corporations of India. Our first speaker, Dr. Murthy. Hello, PV. PV comes from the Taj Group of Hotels, as we fondly know, and this particular organization needs no introduction, has been for the oldest time in Indian hospitality industry, and several case studies that Taj has given to the service culture. PV himself comes with a vast experience in HR. At this point, PV heads the entire group of the Taj Hospitality Services, which have Ginger Hotels, Taj Stats, and many others. And he really drives talent transformation and HR transformation within the organization. Prior to joining Taj, PV was part of the Coca-Cola company, where across a period of 15 years, he held several positions and have led several initiatives for the organization. And if one thing one can learn from PV, it's about an undying attitude of how to be a student of learning. And just to share with all of you, just this decade, if I have to talk about PV, he has gone ahead and got his PhD in strategic human resource management, got certified as a coach with INSEAD, became a senior faculty in academy, and is adjourned as level 1 thought leader. And that's really what learning is all about, guys. You know, one can never stop learning, and PV really inspires many to continue learning and be on this path. Thank you for doing that to all of us. Outside of work, PV is a fitness enthusiast, loves to do yoga and gym, and really talks to many people about how do you stay fit as an individual. Loves watching movie in his free time, and something that even I like to do. And another thing is, I think he loves writing, and he was sharing with me that this pandemic has given him a tad bit of free time to really do something more in writing. And I'm sure you all must be following PV on his LinkedIn, where he avidly shares his thoughts and views. So, welcome to our session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amol. Thanks for those kind words.
Pleasure. Our next eminent speaker is Indrajit Sengupta, and Indrajit heads the Hindustan Beverages Limited, same company as PV used to be a part of, and at this point, Inder actually leads the initiatives for this particular organization. And again, HCCB really does not require any introduction. I think there is no party that happens without a Coke in everyone's hand. So that's the kind of impact. If one goes into studying, many great marketing case studies come out of this particular organization. Quite a lot of innovation that has happened in the marketing space by this organization. And if you talk about Inder's career, Inder started with GE, which is one of the organizations which all of us aspire to work with. He started his career there. For 13 years, he held several critical positions and led several critical projects, including one of the eminent ones, where in Bangalore itself, the John F. Welch Technology Center was something established, and it's really the first of its kind state-of-the-art R&D center outside of US. Other than that, he has also been instrumental in launching the total rewards framework when he was part of the GE healthcare systems. And he has really transformed many initiatives in that organization, post which he was working at leadership levels with Mars Incorporation, Johnson and Johnson, where again he led quite a lot of HR transformations. And outside of work, Inder really loves to travel. He's an avid photographer. I would really love to see your collection of photos, Inder. I'm not sure if you are on Insta, but if you are, I would definitely be one of your followers now. And loves to read, and unique thing that he loves any genre of music. Something that would touch his heart is something he will enjoy. And that's the kind of person Inder is. So Inder, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Amog. Appreciate the opportunity.
Pleasure. So with that, let's dive into today's session. And our first theme is really walking down the memory lane. I had promised everyone that our sessions will be no GAN sessions, but really learning from experiences of our eminent speakers. And what we would really do is go to our speakers and ask them really about their time when the first time they became a manager, they realized that the first time I have a responsibility to lead people, or I understand the true meaning of being a leader. So let's turn to our speakers and hear from them, maybe back 15, 20, 30 years. But yes, let's start with TV. What are your early memories when you realized our leader?
Thank you, Amog. Thanks for having me here on this session. Before I answer your question, I want to say something about all the three organizations, DDI, Coke, and my current organization, Indian Hotels or Taj. There is a lot of emotional connect with all the three organizations for me. Right. I think, 20 years back, I attended my first training session outside India with DDI. It was called Maximizing Performance. It was about performance management. The star which you showed on the screen, stars and star hours, that's what it all covered. I still remember that as one of the best programs I have ever attended. That's one thing. And of course, you talked about my experience with Coke, and Coke is very, very close to my heart. All the learnings which you talked about, they came from Coke. And of course, my current organization, which is a great organization, which has been a case study for customer centricity, and also, which has been the pinnacle of values and the ethics part of it. So this session is something special for me. So thank you for having me on this session.
Pleasure.
So coming to your question, Amor, back to my memory lane. I became the first time manager in 1985. I finished my law and personnel management diploma, and joined an organization called Ferroalloys Corporation, FECOR. It's down south in Andhra Pradesh. I joined there as a trainee, and then I became, after 1 year, assistant manager, personnel and administration. It so happened that there was no place for me to sit in HR function. It was a small office. So then they made me sit in the administration function because I was personnel and administration. During my free time, I read all the legal files which were there in the office. There were several cases which were pending in the Supreme Court. So then what happened, the gentleman who was handling the legal cases, he died of heart attack. I was handling HR or personnel during that time. So the management called me and said that, can you handle these legal matters? I was not at all confident. I was scared. But I said, yes, I'm confident I can do it. I never stepped out of my town, Vizag, till such time alone. It was always with my parents. So I started traveling to Delhi to handle the cases in Supreme Court. These were not just the legal matters or the labor law matters. I'm sorry. It was, various matters. It's related to disputes with electricity board, so on and so forth. Taxation, some of those were taxation matters. So I think that, that was my first managerial or the leadership role you talked about. The leader in me came out during that particular period is what I would say. Let me explain this a little bit more. I didn't know the Hindi language. My English was not so good. I never went out of my town till such time all alone. I used to sit in the train, travel 48 hours, reach Delhi, and have discussions with the senior most advocates. Half of the time I won't understand as to what they were discussing on those legal matters. It was an absolute struggle. I used to go back to the guest house and cry, thinking that I would lose this job, I'll be a failure, and this management probably will ask me to go. More than the fear of losing the job, that I'm going to ditch my organization, I have committed to them, and not able to do the job properly was what really killed me. But I think that, I had put lots and lots and lots of hard work. I used to sit there and read all the legal documents till 2:30, 3 in the morning in the guest house or at the hotel. Used to have those discussions with all those senior advocates like K.K. Venugopal, F.S. Nariman, Kapil Sibal, G. Ramaswamy, many others. You name any senior advocate, I would have briefed him at some point in time. It was not the legal job. What did I do differently? I used to go to the Supreme Court every day morning, take the pass, and sit there observing the lawyers, be it whoever it is, it's observe whether it is a labor law matter or a civil matter, how the advocates would argue and have those learnings. I think that, that's what. And I think that, that was my first leadership transition from a manager. And it was a lot of struggle. And after a couple of years, I started getting recognized as the best corporate lawyer. They used to call me a corporate lawyer. I was not into law, I was in HR. But the learning from this is that without really putting boundaries around us, that we belong to HR, I need to do only HR job. I think that it's all about leadership. And I think that, that made me a different person altogether. And till now, I really relish that experience. I do not know if you have answered your question, but this was an experience down the memory line I could never ever forget when we speak about moving into a leadership transition from manager and becoming a leader. That's what it is, Amol.
Wonderful. And I think what you said around having no boundaries is something very profound. I often tell everyone, when you talk about a success profile and a person who's showing potential, that individual, whether him or her, doesn't matter, will always break the boundaries in the right way to ensure that they are able to drive result for the organization.
Absolutely. And also, the perseverance and resilience, how do we stay true to ourselves and put in that lots of hard work? I believe that, without hard work, however intelligent we are, I don't think that, without hard work, we can't really become a leader. Leadership is all about putting that lots and lots of efforts and then, trying to pick up the ground level stuff. I would advocate all the new managers to look at it from a different perspective. It is irrespective of the college you go to, irrespective of the kind of knowledge you have. It's the hard work which makes you a better leader.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's hear it from Inder. Inder, your first memories when you realized that you are a leader.
So very similar in terms of how PV described. I think, when we started out, at that point in time, it was very prestigious in that sense to be with GE, a great company and all of that. And, some of the facilities and everything that they had built was incredible. It's so far ahead of its time that when you're just out of college and you get in, there's a huge pressure that you build on yourself, saying, will I even survive for 3 months? Okay. So that was the starting point. And I think you start to look up to people who are around you. And then as you decipher a little bit, you realize, in many ways, they are more or less the same as we are, similar backgrounds, similar types of maybe education, a lot of people who are common to who you get to know. So it reduces your pressure in that sense. But my first 3 months, I was almost on the verge of like, any day I could be getting sacked, and no one was actually doing anything to me. I was doing my job well. Everyone was actually appreciative, but you have that pressure at the back of your mind saying, oh, you're just so much enthralled by this, the brand, the company, the culture. Suddenly you start interacting with everybody on first name basis, where we came out of college and everywhere you had to say sir and professor and so on. A huge change. And then you have a boss, and he's remained my friend, my mentor, all these years now. He had this random thing because there was a vacancy in the plant, which was in Baroda at that point in time. And I was barely 6 months in the job. And he said, look, it's a fresh plant. Everything can start again. So please go there and start working. And, being a single, you just pack your bag and move. And, it was obviously a great plant. There is no question about it. Baroda is a great city to live in. But I think what struck me most was the issue that you start to deal with was a very basic one, which is medical insurance. Okay? Very basic, absolutely administrative. There is no major thing to do except that you sign an agreement and everyone takes that as a policy. Whenever there is something to be done, you just go and help. And technically, it just works as a policy if you see how it is. But for a whole lot of reasons, it was not working. So there was a whole lot of anxiety, worries. People would curse HR. People would come into the room and say, "You guys don't do your job. Why is this company even paying you salary?" And something that you're not prepared to hear. And given the fact that someone had put so much of trust in you to say, go, I'm sure you'll be able to do a great job. I think that itself was the first leveler to say, you don't need someone else to tell you, but you actually can lead. And is the only one as an HR professional at that point in time in that plant. And long story short, you fix the problem, you start to interact with people, how they value things that come their way. But for me, I think the big pieces you keep learning every time that you're in a leadership role is when you start showing empathy and you don't start reacting to people, you start giving a response to them. So I understand you're angry, but can I work with you to either fix the process, fix the problem? What is it that is not happening for you that I can help you with? So you get into more of a service model, you get into more of helping someone, you get into understanding why the individual is in trouble, worried, concerned, fear, all of that. And I think the moment you start doing that, it doesn't matter what level you are, I think you are in a leadership role because someone is looking up to you no matter how they respond to you, that you are the only one I can come to who can fix it. Now, in a way, it looks really big, but actually it isn't. And I think oftentimes that's the situation we don't realize. And for me, that was like the first lesson to learn when someone says, go, you can fix the problem, but you actually realize yourself that you can actually do it. And that is a big, big leveler for me. I've always remembered those instances, which is probably the reason why, anything to do with health, with well-being of associates remain close to my heart. It goes back to all those early lessons.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks. I think what you said on the empathy. I'm sure everybody have heard about it, read about it, but often the most difficult one when it comes down to demonstrating. So absolutely an important point, and it is a leveler for everyone. So let's move to the next theme. What we really were looking at, and that's really the development zone. Now, DDI research says that there are actually three parts of this.
Thank you, Puchki.
One is really the development requirements of individual, the self. Okay. The second is the needs of your role itself. And the third is aligning these two of self and role to what the business requirements are. And hand on my heart, the first many years, I would say, I think either I never worked development plan. There was always a form, and in the performance review, one had to development strengths and development areas are, but one never worked on it. Okay, I forget about even making it relevant to the role or the business side of it. And then came DDI, where I realized that how important it is to continuously keep developing yourself. And the reviews became very stringent, this development part of it. And the question was, how is your development contributing to the organization success? And when you look at the research, that DDI did on the front levels of leadership, what we found percent of frontline leaders completely miss out the point that there is an organization purpose to align to that. So let's go back to our speakers and hear from them their first aha or oh my moment of when they decided that I need to align my development to my role and also the organization, or include the organization purpose in my development priority. Let's start from Inder, your view, your experience.
So a couple of them. I think the earliest, and so there is one early and one later.
Yeah,
But the
I'm sure.
earliest one was where I landed up in one of the JV assignments, and
Mhm.
from where you think that, oh, it is so nice to come back and work in HR. From the moment you land, you're seen as a corporate guy, which means
Yeah.
everyone just hates your face. Okay, and
Yes.
there is no logical reason. You don't know them. There is no interaction with them. There is no history with them. But it's just the fact that you come from a something called corporate makes you a bad guy. Okay, and at an early stage in your career, you really don't know how to deal with it. Okay, there's
Yes.
no one who's going to coach you. There's no one who's going to help you. On top of that, it was at a place where the plant was away from the main city in Gujarat. I also didn't have a great boss who was being helpful to me. So he was like, okay, there's a corporate guy, park him somewhere and let him just carry on. And I think, in that sense where nobody likes you, or you at least perceive that way, that nobody's trying to be of use to you, if you can start finding some purpose to connect with somebody else. So I spent the time in the afternoon trying to work with the shifts, trying to help them make a light bulb, because that was the business. And in the process, started learning what the quality function does, what the procurement function does, how does material actually come in, just map the whole thing and start learning. So that was a great experience of learning on the job. And you suddenly, at least from having so many people not liking you, at least 60 people starting to like you, 60% of the population starting to like you.
Yeah.
And I think, those are moments which turn you in a way to say, if you can find a common purpose, and this is besides what is written on the wall and told to people, if you can start articulating in a way that is meaningful to anybody, I think you can do a lot of things. It doesn't have to be that everyone works or agrees with you, but you can make a lot of things work. So that was one very early on. The other one was, a very interesting program that used to be in my previous company, and it was with a company called Human Performance Institute, which is into health, wellness, and all of that. And the interesting thing about this is the cream of sportsmen are actually students of this institute. So, the best of tennis players would be going there to learn. And part of what they obviously teach is about energy, and energy, which is mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. But the bigger piece of it is they actually help you write a purpose for yourself. And that was, I think, the most evolved opportunity for me that I've ever had, where you write a purpose for yourself and you start accepting a lot of things that you're not good at. You also start accepting a lot of things that you're good at, and you also start thinking about how to marry this with the purpose of the company that you go to, people that you work with. And it's incredibly refreshing because it doesn't hold you to something which is written. You can continue to keep refreshing it every single day or every single month, because something else is striking you about what you can do, what you can do to help somebody else as the primary purpose for yourself. I think that was really, really revealing. So there is no question in my mind that unless and until your own purpose is married to where you're working, you can't really make a dent.
Absolutely true. How did you do that? How did you align these two?
I think, the primary piece is really about yourself, and are you willing to align or not is the question to be asked. So I'm fine with this is my purpose, but if I find that it is not aligning with how a company works, then
Yeah.
probably that is not the place to work. Okay, you either change yourself, or you change your company, and that's the only option that is left for you. It starts becoming very black and white. But the reason I say that is because it actually gives you clarity. What most people struggle with when you start looking at careers and so on, uh, most of the time the purpose is somebody else's. It is somebody's dream that you're trying to chase. I'm trying to go to a job, a designation, a particular location because someone else wants me. It's not what I really want. And so the willingness to accept that it is about me, the willingness to take that accountability, and then see where things merge together actually helps. So all the steps that I'm talking about is what I have had to take and learn from the fact that there are a lot of mistakes that you make in the way, but you're happy to do that because that's helping you with your longer term goals. Is what it actually influences you to move forward.
Absolutely. Great, great. Thanks for really sharing that, because aligning self-purpose to organization purpose, I think one really prospect deep and see where that alignment can come. And once you find that, I think one should not waste any time and just ensure that you make that happen quickly. So thank you so much for sharing that. I will remember that for a very long time, you know. So let's hear from PV. PV, your first memory of how and when you aligned your development priorities.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Amol. I'll speak about my own experience. Like you said, you asked us to speak about our experience and not to give any gyan. So I'm not going to give any gyan on this. But I'll tell you, my own development. You talked about my PhD, INSEAD, master's at INSEAD and all that. All those things came subsequent.
Yes.
But the initial development, one thing I already talked about, the Supreme Court learning and all that.
Yeah.
And I think that, what happened very early in my career, it's a little bit funny. Before I entered into the job market, before I joined the organization, someone said something like, you need to face competition from XLRI guys, XLRI Jamshedpur. Like I was saying, I went to the university in a small town. My entire education was there. I never knew as to what was XLRI and all that stuff. So there was a sort of inadequacy and fear in my heart. That's where I decided to put my focus on my own development.
Yeah.
I still remember, and in this library I have that book, Lee Iacocca. I didn't know where to begin my HR journey. I started reading Lee Iacocca. And then, subsequently, I started focusing on everything. It could be an autobiography, it could be a behavioral science, it could be something related to law. I was all over the place is what I would say. So I was plain lucky because, the circumstances were such that there was a push. Otherwise, you won't survive kind of a situation. Coming to the organization's purpose, again, I have been very, very lucky. Starting from my first organization, many of you won't know about this company, Baroy Lois Corporation, a very, very humble and humane organization. And they believe a lot. It is the smaller version of Tata's, I would say. Much smaller version of Tata's. It's a 500 crore company manufacturing ferroalloys. It was all about community. You exist for the sake of community was the philosophy I had seen in the management. And during that initial period, I was made to become the secretary of Lions Club of Sri Ram Nagar. So then, there was a lot of giving back to the society kind of a thing. Over a period of time, to answer your question as to, aligning our development into the organization's purpose, I think that, it happened sequentially. At Coca-Cola, for example, we created the community colleges in Maharashtra. The market developers in Hindustan Coca-Cola, that's a very, very important job because, that's an interface with the customers. We created community colleges, picked up the local students and started teaching them through Bombay University, of course. And of course, even now also at Taj, we have several programs. One is Golden Threshold program. We work with TIS. TIS, it's a Bachelor of Vocational program. So they run the classrooms and we train them up in our hotels. Similarly, we have something called as Tata Strive, IHCL Tata Strive. Again, it's a sort of a vocational program. We have several such centers where we train up the hospitality students. So net, I think that, learning and developing ourselves and focusing on our talent and reaching out to the talent even before the talent reaches our doorstep.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that HR manager's role is not to wait for the talent to come to your doorstep and develop them. Reach out to the talent when they are at the colleges and then start focusing on them. So it gives you a lot of edge. You can build the character, you can build the culture, you can build the right kind of skills is what my belief is. Like I said, I've been lucky, and in every organization I worked, I think that, I could align the development or learning with the organization's purpose of all.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And, what you just said reminded me of what Ram from ICICI once happened to tell me, that when the entire BFSI boom was happening in India, and he found that there were not enough bankers ready to manage ICICI Bank, they decided to start going to B schools to start developing people using a curriculum that would be relevant for building talent for the fraternity.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the mark of really great organizations who get ahead of the curve and start developing talent at the school and college level itself.
Absolutely.
Other time, but yeah, we can definitely have this.
Yeah. But Amog, let me say that Ram and I worked together at Coca-Cola. He's ex-Coca-Cola, very early in his career. So we both worked together. I know him very well. Yeah.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you so much. Let's, before we dive to the next theme, let us do a quick poll to understand some perspective from all our listeners today. So Mitali, can I request you to pull up our poll? So we just want to understand your natural way of learning. How do people learn at this point in time? What's real go-to? Let's have 10 seconds and
All right.
Got
many responses coming.
Maybe another 3 seconds. 3,
Sure.
1. Let's end the poll and put the results on display.
Sure.
All right. Wow. So we have a pretty diverse audience talking about through managers. 33% people feel that, top thought experts 30%, formal workshops 14, and search engines 24. That's pretty interesting. We happened to actually do a poll on LinkedIn as well, and we invited responses there. We found a bit of a paradox, interestingly. While we saw that many people are feeling that investing the same in them in this pandemic time, great, but really the go-to method was search engine, which we thought was a paradox. But thank you so much for your perspective, which says that thought experts and through managers is also a popular method of learning. So with that, an important part is really creating the environment. And a couple of research have said that the backbone of any development to happen is a strong manager support. And unfortunately, in most organizations, that management or managerial commitment is lacking. And at the same time, our research is that frontline leaders really look forward for grooming and development for their immediate managers. Many times, unfortunately, they don't find their managers really ready. So let's turn to our panelists to know what are some of the things that one will have to do to really make this environment of learning. So let's start with PV. PV, your views.
Yes, Thank you. Niranjan is saying hi to me. Hi, Niranjan. Uh, Niranjan is from Coca-Cola. We work at Coke. To answer your question, I think that, it's, I've had the privilege of working with great team members, Amol. I feel really, really lucky, whether it's at Coke or even in my current organization. I learn a lot from my team members. And in terms of, what do I do for my people's development? I think I consider myself not a very good coach or mentor. That's my perception. But I think that, I give a lot of space to them, a lot of space to experiment and learn by themselves. This is very early in my career. It so happened that Jeevan Jose, who was with me in Coke Hyderabad, he joined from TIS. He was working with me because of all the issues and problems, operational problems. I always felt guilty that I was not really giving him the right kind of guidance. When he moved to another location, he said something like, "Thank you, PV. You gave me a great opportunity. You gave me freedom to learn and experiment." That whether he said it out of courtesy or he really meant it, I do not know. Perhaps he meant it. So, but I think that, that is one thing I believe that, everybody can learn. Learning is a human experience. As human beings, we all learn. I think that, that's how we evolve over a period of time. I think giving people that space and opportunity, and of course, it's the programs, like I was talking about DDI's maximizing program. I was not trying to please you. That's genuinely one of the best programs I have attended. Making sure that they have that experience of learning, the experiential learning, whether it is through a formal program or through an experiences at the workplace, is what makes people develop. I think that, that's how I would answer your question, Amog. I do not know if I have answered you right. Otherwise, please feel free to pose more questions.
No, so really, in your view, as a manager, how have you promoted development with your team? And then when getting into leadership level, how have you really built the environment so that the learners can learn, but more importantly, manager support? Because the most common thing that happens after a classroom program is when the participant goes back, excitedly talks about something learned, the manager says, yeah, I know about all that. I hope you had a good break. Now get back to work.
Yeah.
How, as a manager, you have turned that around to make people realize that development is important and it is not a passing by affair.
Yeah.
Okay. And as a leader, how did you help sustain that? And same question as well afterwards.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. It's like this. I believe in long-term programs. My belief is that learning can't be an event. Learning is not an event. It is a long-term program. It is a marathon. So I always believed in creating long-term programs. The program which I was talking about, LEAP, where DDI was also one of the partners at Coke, or the General Manager Development Program at Taj, or the HR program here, or the Chief Engineers program, all these programs were a 9-month-long program.
Yeah.
And it's not just the classroom, Amol. Classroom is one part of it. How do we make sure that between the classroom, we give them the experiences? And how do we sustain it? My experience is through action learning projects. Action learning project is where the rubber hits the road. All the learnings you have had in the classroom, when you do a project, and all these action learning projects, how do we make sure that these are real, which would really get integrated into the business strategy or what business is trying to do, picking up an organization's issue, an issue faced by one of the hotels, for example. We did this general manager development program, and then the kind of action learning projects our general managers did actually surprised me. I was so surprised to see the kind of action learning projects and the kind of benefit. We have got back, whatever we invested, we got back 5x of the investment through the action learning projects, right? And how do we sustain it? I think that, it is making it part of the culture in the organization. It's you learn as a manager, you learn, keep learning so that you become a role model, and also, have those processes in the organization where there is peer learning that is possible. Again, on this action learning project, we have something called as Ocean. Ocean is a process where, the learning takes place between the peers. The guy who is in London, the guy who is in New York, the guy who is in Chennai or Bangalore or Delhi, all these people virtually, they come together, and there is a set process through which, each other, it's a sort of a group learning that takes place. I think that, when we integrate this learning as part of the culture, it is sustainable. That's number one. And second is, like I was saying, learning is not an event. Learning or developing talent is a strategic event in the organization. Many times organizations feel that learning and development is the responsibility of HR people. That's completely wrong. It is a strategic event where the entire organization need to put focus. That's when, it is sustainable. So that's what I feel.
Great. Thank you so much, PV. Your views on how have you done it as a manager and as a leader?
I'm not going to make that distinction, Amog. What I'm going to try and do is build on what PV was talking about, and then sort of break it into two things. One is how to do your job, and then how to actually lead the organization. So if you truly break it down, it's about, it's about me. What can I do to learn? What can I do to perform in my job? The second one is largely about how can I help the business? Okay. And the third one is that I'm looking at really the larger organization as a whole, which is what applies to all senior leaders as you, grow in the organization. Age not being the criteria at all. And you can have different people at different ages being in any of these spots. So if you see the infrastructure that you also need to put in, if it is about individuals coming into the job, could be freshers, could be lateral hires, new to the industry, new to the sector itself, then you're building that infrastructure to actually have guides, mentors, and a capability team that actually works with them to show them how to make it work. Yeah, that's really building the frontline skills with people. And that could be with everybody. Your management trainees go through that. Lateral hires who come in to the company to do that. And they could be in marketing. They could be in the market, which is the frontline sales team. They could be in the commercial team. They could be in supply chain. So it doesn't matter what function, but you have that infrastructure to, put someone behind or a team of people behind who are building basic capability to do your job. So that's one part. And the role that the entire leadership then has to come and play is to ensure that it is working, and you become more of a roadblock remover than anything else. That's primarily where I would like leaders to have that role. The second one is, obviously, for whether it's a functional capability or you're talking about leadership, every company has its own structured plan. So do we. I'm sure the same thing goes with, Taj as well. Any other company, everyone has a model to do that. I think what happens is as you grow in the career and in leadership roles, it changes from, expecting someone to teach you to learning by yourself. And so the biggest lesson that we have learned out of this whole COVID crisis, we have never learned from peers as much as we have done in the last 3 months. So whether it is in this forum, there are so many folks who have joined in. The number of questions that they are asking is also making me think about what are their perspectives and learning from them. And that's a fantastic thing that was remaining untapped for a long time, and that somehow has in many ways been uncorked for me. And I think that's the big piece that we are also driving within our company as well, where you're bringing in functional teams, whether it is the large supply chain teams, whether it is the sales team, as well as the leadership team. And they have formed together what we call as a capability council. And it has got nothing to do with who reports to whom. They have their own budgets, but the biggest piece that they are doing together is what are the things that they can actually learn from one another, transfer between one another, which is technologies, tools, skills, as well as curriculum sometimes. So for example, if someone was to do a program on facilitation skill, probably it was getting done 3 times, okay, in 3 different ways. Suddenly, because of this council, you're doing it one way and the whole company gets it as one type of a program, and the experience is superb. And that's what, as an infrastructure, you can put in place from a leadership standpoint to say this is what you can do. And I think as leaders and personally as you know, as a line manager myself, some of the things that you actually have to encourage within your team is not just about giving space to let people experiment, but more than that, actually help teach one another. In fact, immediately after this program, we have a session coming up on compensation and benefits, and it'll be one of my direct reports running this program for all of us in HR, and the same thing gets replicated across the company. So if you have a role where you feel that everyone is holding hands, it's like a circle, and if you can provide the space to everybody to share their learnings and skills so that the whole team together learns and remains on the same page, it actually elevates the capability much faster than trying to do individual sessions, isolated sessions where you're trying to have people come in, sign up, and then you'll have dropouts. This actually enhances capability much faster. And so it can be led by anybody. Everyone is a student. The same individual can change roles from teacher and student. So it's enormously beneficial.
Beautiful, thanks. We have a question slightly relevant to the current conversation. So, should the managers invest time to build close-knit relations with their teams so that the development can happen?
Absolutely.
This question.
I think
the importance of it for the person.
I think it happens in the normal course, and it's the human to human connection, I would say, when we are interested in the other human being, and when we are focusing on their development and our development through them, the relationship becomes a bit more personal. I think that's needed.
Absolutely.
Above, I'll probably just add on to that. Sometimes what we miss out in some of these discussions is instead of saying, okay, should or should we not have, use every interaction that we have with our team members in whatever skills we learn. So even coaching doesn't have to be like a formal one-on-one session. It can be done on the floor. So yesterday, I'm remembering there was a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I could sense that she's extremely annoyed, frustrated, and the conversation is not going the way she would have probably wanted. It's very easy to kind of just stop and pull yourself out of it and say, hey, you feel stressed out. This seems to be something else. Tell me what the issue is. And these are things that you will know when you interact with your team closely. So there is nothing that you can go away from, just like how PV was talking about. But you can also keep using many of the skills in interactions like this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Inder. So, your question really, it is important. And rather than working on just developing the inner circle or the people you are comfortable with, it's important to ensure that as a manager or a leader, we keep expanding that circle to pretty much everyone whom we touch in our team and outside. So that's really what is important. It's an ongoing process. One small mistake, and yes, people can pull you down. But I often say leadership is a thankless job. You have to do 1,000 good deeds to really build your name, but one bad deed can actually take the name off. So it is a marathon, really.
I think you have hit the nail on its head, Amol. I think that it is when it comes to developing talent, it's not our own inner circle or our own HR teams.
Yes.
As HR leaders, it's our responsibility to develop people in the organization. Again, I'm using the term people because in many organizations, a few of the people are subjected to the programs, calling a high potential program. I don't really believe in that kind of a thing. As HR leader, create the right kind of culture within the organization and make sure that, you develop, groom talent for the organization and also, for the future. When you do that, I think that, the talent management, what we talk about, for example, the talent management framework, which we have got at Taj, developing talent is the focal point of our talent management strategy.
Yeah.
It's on one hand, it links itself to the business strategy, and on the core of it is, developing how would you develop talent basis your organization strategy. How would you create those critical capabilities for the organization so that the organization moves forward is what we need to think about as HR leaders.
Absolutely. We have to be more inclusive than anybody else can imagine, really.
That's our job. That's our job. It's not about inclusion. It's our job. It's our responsibility. We can't be inward looking to think about, the development of our team members. It is the developing everybody in the organization. It is ultimately, the business. We are business leaders, and business is trying to achieve something. How do we create those capabilities is what ultimately development is all about. That's how I look at it.
Yes. And that really then brings us to an important element of what we the sustainability part of it. So while we spoke about creating the environment and it is important, but it is really about the sustainability part of it. DDI research has shown what we popularly or fondly call this as KAZAM, and that's an acronym. It starts with communication, which I think most HR does well, but this communication is really about why are we doing this and for whom we are doing it, and also doing the communication with the immediate managers of the participant, involving all the relevant stakeholders in the communication process to explain the benefit and not what that program is all about. The missing point often I see is explaining the benefit as to what will your employee gain if they go through this particular program. I think that stress is very important. Okay. The next part is really setting the accountabilities, right? And it can be at all levels within HR, within the talent teams, with the managers, with the leadership, with the CEO of the organization. Because like PV said, development is a marathon and it cannot happen by accident. So unless you have set up the accountabilities right and you really review those accountabilities regularly, it is not going to help. The next part is skills, and often we focus on only the skills of people who will go through the program. But we actually learned that giving skills to the managers to actually review or encourage development is also important, and many times it's missed. So how do you really become more inclusive in building those skills? A simple example could be many times even in HR, HR manager does not know how to write a good IDP or audit an IDP on SMART objectives. And I've done this with many sessions of room full of HR, and I had less than 10% people who could raise their hand saying, I understand SMART objectives and I can audit an IDP on it. So really skill building is at all levels. The next is alignment, and this one is interesting because what you build often has to be adapted basis what works and what does not work. And I often like to call it at macro level, which is using the organization's larger agendas, and micro level, which is the initiative itself. And many times you have a lot of distractions, a large product launch, performance management reviews happening, or engagement surveys. All these take the eye away from development. So how do you put the learner back on the saddle is something that has to be planned for. And that's what alignment is all about. And the last is measurement, where you really talk about lead and lag measures. And at DDI, we have done some studies, and I just wanted to flash two of them to talk about really the impact of before and after the program that participants and the observers around the participants they have felt, or how ready the organization is to ensure the promotability of participants is there, or the employee engagement if that has improved. So it is a planned process when you talk about sustaining development in organization. And I would again say it's not by chance. So let's get back to our speakers to hear from them. How have they driven sustainability for their organizations to ensure that there is maximum ROI or ROE as many call it, because ROI can be sometimes a little tricky. PV, can we start with you?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I remember, and I don't remember which research work talked about it. The NPA, the Net Promoter Score of leadership development programs, is minus 60. Minus 60, which means that the ROI which you are talking about is negative. And also initially you said something very important. While HR does the learning and development programs, the business won't really look at it as something that is needed for the business. I'll start from there. I think the way we have done it, especially at Taj, is, I was talking about it earlier. The way we do it is that we look at the business strategy. Even at Coke also, we did the same thing, by the way. The way we do it is that look at the business strategy, understand as to what are the critical capabilities that are needed for the business strategy, and then, draw the people strategies or the development strategies as to how would you build those critical capabilities. And then, put the action plan in place and build those critical capabilities. And then what happens? It is necessarily the business plan or what business has been trying to achieve. So we have that framework in place. And the other thing I was talking about is through action learning projects. And this is out of my experience. I did the general manager development program at Coke as well. But I must admit that the action learning projects which we did there were not totally effective, I would say. I was a bit disappointed with that, perhaps. But whereas as the experience builds on, the kind of action learning projects, if you are teaching people on business acumen strategy and financial acumen, people doing not just the business simulations, but also picking up one project each, and with the help of their own team members, or it could be a cross-functional team, doing that. And then when you present back the results to the management as to how much money you could gain because of the learning which they have got through this program, I think that the ROI, the return on investment, is pretty visible. Business leaders expect visible results. If we are talking about some models and saying that this will come back after 5 years, when the business is suffering because of various reasons, no business leader would really tolerate that kind of a situation. This is where I think that to summarize, one is how do you link your learning and development strategies to your business strategy is one thing. The second is showing that immediate impact, which is a double-edged sword. I would say that people would learn faster by doing those action learning projects, and then business also could see those results very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Your views.
So very similar to how PV explained, and of course the chunk of learning is always by doing. So at this point in time, for example, there are multiple folks in my team working and actually deploying new programs for the whole of the bottling investments group, which is the bottling business within Coca-Cola. It's around leadership development. It's around how do you lead and inspire during a crisis situation. So they are actually doing that, and they're doing it in a very, very empowered way because they are the owners of it. So I feel that the learnings as you would have is, of course, there is the piece around learning by doing, and everyone then gets immediate results, and also that the learning is much faster, and you probably tap into many more sources of information than just one source of information. But more than that, the reason why learning would sustain is, of course, there is business strategy, there is learning and development, there is also the talent strategy that we need to link it. And the moment you start making individuals who now become expert in that specific domain, they become the champions to roll that out further and further. So they start creating a whole set of change champions by themselves. and that does not need any other additional infrastructure to be put in. The only thing that the leadership has to do is get out of their way, because very often it's leadership coming in their way to prevent them from working, which I think is the
Correct.
only advice to get away from it. And you can make the program more sustainable. Now, do you need to pay attention to them? Of course. Do you need to, from time to time, assess whether those skills are actually getting used or not as line managers? Of course. And you will do that in talent forums, in learning forums, and so on. But I think the
Yeah.
moment you start linking business strategy, talent strategy, and learning strategy, and empowering individuals to become the champions to sustain those programs themselves, you have actually created this whole culture where
Environment.
learning becomes important to everyone, and that is why it will sustain. You'll never be able to do it any other way. The moment you start putting rules,
Yes.
everyone has a reason to oppose the rules.
Absolutely. I think you said that nicely. The moment you put a rule and make it a compulsion, then people really don't want it. You have to get it to a pedigree where people really want it, and want to really do development for themselves. So thank you so much for sharing that view. With that, let's take some questions. We really wanted to have a good chunk of time so that we can have a good question and answers. So I would request our guests to type in their questions. We already have few, and I'm just going to call out a couple of them, and we will take this one by one. Okay. Uh, how dynamic is leadership in HR space from situation to situation and from time to time? What shift is I think the question is really, does HR need to be dynamic from time to time and from situation to situation? And what are some of the things that HR should do to make that shift? Uh, Either of you, who would like to go first?
Okay.
Thierry?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I believe that, it is HR's role is completely dynamic,
Hmm.
and HR needs to make those shifts because, we all know that the business is operating in a volatile environment. We used to talk about VUCA, really understanding as to, what does that VUCA really means to us. But, during this COVID-19 situation, we now really know as to what is meant by VUCA. It is, given that scenario, I think that, HR needs to be not only strategic, but also needs to be dynamic. And, HR needs to change its gears basis the situation, and, how quickly, I can give you one example. I was speaking about NPA being -60. My intention is not to demean leadership development programs, and I'm a strong believer in development. But the thing is that, if we hang on creating a leadership development calendar year on year, and then put the standard things there, and then start asking people to attend, like Inder said that, maintaining a register and seeing as to how many people are attending, I have seen this in several organizations, and that's not the way to develop people.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, understanding that human experience is nothing but development, and this is where giving them that space, creating that culture, and be flexible about it. How do you make sure that you build flexible leaders is the whole thing that is needed at this point in time. So HR needs to be flexible, HR needs to be dynamic to create the dynamic strategies. We can't stick to one particular strategy and say that this is what's going to work. We need to keep changing our strategies.
Thanks for sharing that. Inder, your views?
So I'll just add on to PV. So the moment you have VUCA, the alternative to that, as you call it, as VUCA Prime, which is, if you expand that, then it stands for vision, it is understanding, it is clarity and adaptability. And I think in the last 3 months, probably no other function would have made as much of a shift as much as HR has done. And if you see in terms of the capabilities that any HR leader or any function would have put in place, it has really gone way beyond HR. Now, the degree of that can vary company to company, but there is absolute clarity in my mind that the function has made a radical shift, and I think that's the right shift for the function globally.
Thanks. I think I have one question for both of you. how have the critical competencies for HR professionals changed in the current crisis and the time thereafter? I'm sure, I mean, we can't stay away from the pandemic situation, and there have been many questions coming in. So, your views in the, let's start with you. What do you think are some critical competencies?
So, competency is really a mix of multiple skills. So let's not get there. Let's talk about the skills. I think the
Yes.
most important thing that we have actually seen in these last 3 months, and probably for most HR leaders, I'm sure they've been progressing in that direction. The ability to rapidly connect the whole company has undergone a big change. That connecting quality is big, and therefore the ability to then collaborate across multiple functions and solve problems which is not HR. So for the first time, you have HR leaders who don't talk about this is my performance management process. They will talk about how to do performance management in these circumstances. And they are two completely different things. So the connector skills, the collaborative skills, I think has been huge. The ability to reach out and gather knowledge from outside and learn from outside is huge. That's a big tick as a skill, I would say. Your ability to actually get ingrained in the business much more than we have ever been. I can't think of any HR leader who's not connected to what is my sales numbers, what's my production, why are certain things not happening, is probably more radical than ever before. So I guess the business acumen part has genuinely gone up to understanding business in the way it is performed. I spoke about collaboration. I spoke about the piece around connector. The last one is, I think, the health and wellness piece, building that empathy to help people who are in distress, and it has not gone away. So you
Yeah.
still have, how do you treat COVID patients? How do you even manage fear and anxiety in people who are staying at home? Are probably some of the more path-breaking skills that we have built up now.
True. Absolutely. PV, your views?
Yeah, no, I think that I just want to share an experience during this period. Let me say something upfront. I think that the HR's role is fundamentally changing.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally changing. We need to reimagine our role completely. That's my belief. Let me give you one example now. During the recent past, in the last few months, we were working out the bonuses for our people. Our comp and ben manager, who used to sit in the corporate office, he had gone to Jodhpur and got stuck there. Just imagine, rewind and go back 1 year backwards. Last year, had he come during this period and said that I want to go to Jodhpur on leave, we would have told him that how can you go to Jodhpur when the bonuses and salary increases are being worked out. He got stuck there. Every day we had the MS team calls and everything was smooth. Not even one mistake anywhere. That's the job. The credit goes to him and the other team members, obviously. The point I'm trying to make here is we need to reimagine our own talent landscape. The talent does not necessarily sit in the same office, in the same city, in the same country. They can sit anywhere in the world. Your comp and ben manager can sit in New York, whereas the talent acquisition manager can sit in Coimbatore, and you can sit somewhere else, and still you can get the work done. I think that that is one major change that is taking place. How do we reimagine and how do we make sure that whatever digital revolution that is taking place at this point in time, this is a classic example of a digital revolution. Probably you would have called us to one of our hotels, hide our banqueting space. Of course, it is a loss for our business. And then we would have been having this conversation today. But now, we are online. I think that, things have changed.
Yeah.
How do we reimagine? How do we recruit talent? How do we compensate them? How do we manage their performance? How do we measure their performance? And how do we basically understand their potential and groom the talent for the future? And look at it from the employee perspective also. Even employees also have a larger landscape to grow their capabilities and to grow within the organization. That's how I fundamentally look at it in terms of changing HR capabilities and competencies.
Absolutely. I think the whole thing has got pushed into the gig economy that people were talking about, where you can really be flexible. I think this pandemic really has answered many of the questions, though in a full-time context right now. But yeah, I think this question was asked by Aditya Sareen from Tata Power. Another important part which HR will have to possibly support leaders when you talk about leadership is really genuinely building the empathy quotient. And I was talking to one of the senior HR people in a bank, and he was sharing that one of his colleagues got a feedback from his team member, and the team member said, "Ke, sir, jab galti ho jati hai, so yes, you can shout at me when I'm wrong, but try to just do it a little decently because my facial expressions change. And I'm sitting in front of my wife, my mother, my kids, and they know something went wrong. And I have to at least have my dignity in front of them." And this guy was telling me that, Amol, I think it's so relevant that, we as leaders will have to think how we are working, because there are some people who are working out of the lobbies and the chawls. So how do you really genuinely build the empathy and in true sense, leading virtually? That's going to get heightened, really. And policies, I think, need to be redefined at a faster pace than ever before. Great. So we have another question that's on IDP. So the question is that while everybody gets into diligently preparing IDPs, it's only less than 10% who eventually, after a few months, IDP. So are IDPs really relevant for development? Inder, your views?
Okay, so look, and I think sometimes we think about an IDP as something unique. It is only with HR, and so half the problem probably starts because it is an HR process. And just like you were talking about, saying I have to oppose it, so I have to find a different way to oppose it in our own way. Actually, the way, if you think about it, is what if the IDP was my own purpose? And I keep going back to the aligning your purpose, and we have in many of our programs we have run similar quizzes where we ask people saying what is important to you. Salary, salary, a good workplace, a good manager. And the one thing that always keeps coming on top, even ahead of money, is I want to be developed. So if you truly want to be developed, then take it as a purpose rather than an IDP. So I think the IDP creates a problem as a acronym. And if you break it down and say, look, this is about my purpose and I want to be developed, then I think the process starts to work. And then there is accountability, which is important. The second thing is then you genuinely spend time in writing what you want to write. Then you genuinely put efforts to say whether it is actually tagging into every single activity, including my calendar. So do I even block time on my calendar for development? If I do, then I'm serious about my development. If I'm not, then we will continue to have the IDP discussion. Okay. And I think that's where the crux of the problem is, that there is an aspiration that I want to be developed without the commitment to actually developing myself. And if you think about it as a purpose, and if you can communicate to everyone that it is actually everyone's purpose to develop themselves and live up to the potential why we took up these jobs that we are into, I think it will solve the problem. I think because of the a lot of the jargon around it, sometimes it is the process, sometimes it is about who's leading it. It can create perceptions that the more we start breaking those perceptions and making it to be an individual's requirement that we signed up in the beginning, I think it will work absolutely fine. But that's a challenge.
Amog, I think on these IDPs, I also, initially used to work with IDPs, create the IDPs. But like you said, I've realized that, nobody takes IDPs seriously. And also, look at another dichotomy. We talk about 70, 20, 10. 70% development happens by doing, it is actual experience. 20% through coaching, either by manager or external coaching, whatever, and 10% is the classroom, is what we talk about. And when you create an IDP, most of the IDPs, if you take 100 IDPs and check them, It is mostly, you talk about the classroom. The 10% is mentioned in the IDP part of it. This is where we have made a shift to experience maps. What kind of experiences would really develop this person is the question we need to ask ourselves. Anyone who is interested in experience maps can drop an email or write to you, and you can send it to us in whichever manner. We can share a couple of them. But I think that, mapping as to what kind of experiences we need to give to each and every person. So at this point in time, I'm a big proponent of drawing experience maps rather than creating IDPs for individuals. So this is my experience. The second thing is, I think Aditya Sarin asked some question. It appeared, only half of it appeared on the screen. I couldn't see. He said, hi PV, something from Tata Power.
Yeah.
So if you have it, just read it out.
I think he has sent it to you as a private IM. So you can
is it so?
chat,
Okay.
possibly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, he's saying hi. Thank you. I didn't see all these messages till now, Amog. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No problem. I think both of you are absolutely right. Only if you have the passion to develop self, development is relevant, and then no IDP doesn't matter. And what you said on the experience map, PV, is bang on. Add one more element to that, and that defining your barrier of development. And one rule, time cannot be the barrier. Because if you want to develop yourself, you will have to find time for it. And at DDI, we often insist on writing that what do you think will be the barrier? And barrier could be sometimes access to that development initiative itself. I want to build strategic thinking, but my role does not provide for. Or I want to drive innovation, but again, I don't have any opportunities for. That, and the role of manager and HR is to actually to help dissolve that barrier, really, to ensure that the experience can be fructified.
Yeah.
So I'll just add that one to it. Another question.
Amog, can I just, Satya Vegi has written, I'm keen to know more about experience maps PV. How do we go about? My email ID is pv.murthy@ihcltata.com. Is pv.murthy, or otherwise I will type it here to everyone. Just drop an email, I'll send those.
Send it on the chat to everyone, PV, not a problem.
Yes, sure.
Mithali has your email ID.
Yeah.
Another question again from Aditya is around what is your view? Is leader development important or leadership development? And shouldn't it start earlier when the leader is much young and rather than pretty late when they are actually in the senior leadership? So what's your view?
That's a pretty good question.
Amog, I'm actually not very clear about the question, so maybe I'll take an attempt. And if there is any clarification, just help me through it.
No problem.
I think for any company, you are always trying to develop multiple experiences today. And at earlier on, I think you have more opportunities to develop. As you grow higher up in the organization, your opportunities of that many experiences reduces, logically. So I don't think that companies are looking at two things differently. I think the leader is a personal question and it's a choice. So do I want to be a leader or not is a personal question. I don't think any company can answer. But leadership is something that companies definitely invest in. We have invested in very, very early on. And I think there is a very graded process by which you do it, whether you do 70-20-10 or even the personal mentorship and the coaching that leaders provide and managers provide. It's all part of that. So there is an environment. There is all kinds of tools and technologies that are available in our team. The entire leadership development function actually drives this in a very, very graded way. They track individuals in terms of their development in the company. So I think all those infrastructure process is in place. Investment behind it is absolutely in place. Early on, you have more opportunities, but the question of whether you want to be a leader or not still remains with the individual.
I just want to add something to it, Amol.
Yeah.
See, it's like this. Leader development, I thought that, it's a pretty good question. Leader development and leadership development are two different things. Leadership development is when you aggregate all the leaders and run a leadership development program. But we need to realize the fact that each leader is different. And leadership development at some level is individual. It is not collective. You can't get 30 people and then develop them on the same thing. Probably you can develop them on skill part of it, but especially when it comes to the behaviors, each leader is different. The coaching or mentoring or all those aspects which we are talking about, it is individual and it differs from person to person. So I strongly believe in leader development. At some stage you'll have to move into leader development, put a focus on one individual, one leader, understand as to, what makes the difference, how do you make those shifts, internal shifts. And I think that, that's how I look at it.
Perfect. I think we have just time for one last question by Pooja Sharma, asking whether IDPs or any processes, how do you make it a willingness rather than a compulsion among the employees? So basically building buy-in in a way.
Amog, a part of it, I think I would say, a part of it is, if you, most of the time, if it is seen as a HR process, then it doesn't work. The moment you look at it as a business process, then it works. So, for example, why does a business planning process work? Because it is about the business, it's about everybody. And similarly, why does an IDP or whether a performance management system works is because it's for everybody. So as long as the communication is clear that it is meant for everyone will actually benefit out of it. The second thing is that there is also an ownership of the process. So HR brings the capability and process and knowledge and so on, but the actual deployment is always done by the line managers. And if it is not done in partnership, then we will always have this debate of how do we, make it a willing process. So there are three people involved. There is a line manager, there is HR, and there is the individual. And it's a nice way of trying to sort of say, okay, this is like an airport. HR can be the air traffic controller. So we can tell you what's available, how many planes are flying, where are you going, what is the speed at which you need to go. That's one way. The line manager, as actually your co-pilot, can actually help you in how to maneuver the plane. But the moot question is, do you want to take off and land is up to you. So I think that's probably the best way to explain why IDPs can be made to work. If we take the ownership and we know that it is owned by everyone and it benefits everyone.
Great analogy.
I just want to add something to it. I think that, it's when we speak about development, while it is everyone's responsibility to develop people in the organization, HR is the custodian of people. So HR is custodian of people development as well. It goes, and HR can facilitate. HR can create the culture. And how can they do that? I think that every HR manager will have to role model that development. HR leaders, when they start developing themselves, which is visible, when HR leaders bring in changes in their own skills, in their own behaviors, which can be seen by their own team members, outside the team, within the organization, when people would get inspired. And I think that, that is where people will start putting their focus on their own development. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And just to sum up one last comment from me, I think one thing which HR needs to do, and TV was sharing with me a couple of days back, is how our talent plan can really get strongly in the business plan, so that we are talking the business language, guys. Many times in many organizations, HR plan works in isolation and has no really bearing or understanding of what business is. A room full of HR, they have many questions raised that, do you know how your organization makes money? And there are not many HR folks who have really raised their hand saying, I know end to end how my organization makes money. HR starts embracing that to understand it, they will be able to drive initiatives as a partner, like Inder just said. And that's really the true chemistry for success of any initiative. So with that, thank you so much, Inder and PV. It was really
Thank you.
fun having a conversation with both of you, and I personally learned a lot. So thank you so much for coming on our virtual cafe.
Thank you very much, Amol.
Thank you, Amol.
And I want
Well
to
done.
say, everyone on the call, you know, the people from Coke, the people from Taj, and all others, thank you very much for your great participation. I think that, you know, it's a great session, Amol. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you, Rahul.
Bye. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, everyone. And our next session is going to be on for August, where we will be talking about how managers will be managing in the digital era. So look forward to meeting you on that. Thank you.